Welcome again to another episode of the Bridging Divides podcast. My guest today needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyways. People are dying to work with him. He is the Bearded Bowtie, and he is absolutely incredible. He puts the fun in funeral. We have our guest, Justin Wagner, here today. Yes, round of applause, please. Right. Please. We've been wanting to do this for a little while, so I'm glad we can finally sit down together. So welcome.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate
it. We are going to talk about some really, really cool things today. Justin has a funeral home, and he has a lot of great perspectives on things like grief and how to deal with it, how to help people around you, and really dealing with that new transition of life that everybody else has after something like that happens. And so, Justin, thank you.
Thank you.
For being
I appreciate
here.
It.
That is definitely a divide that we all deal with at some point or another. And it is difficult and it's heart-wrenching. Talk about an upheaval of your life to have something like that happen. And so I'm really excited to talk to you and get your perspective and hear your story and hear your insights. So
yeah, I'm excited to give it.
Yeah. So. No, that's great. So tell us a little bit about you. How did you come to have a funeral home? How long have you been doing this?
So I simply work for the funeral home, just to clarify.
Okay, cool.
I don't own it. If I owned it, I wouldn't be here. No, I'm just kidding. No, my sister honestly got a job at the front desk answering phones, and she's like, I think you'd be really good at this. And I said no. I was like, that would make me a hypocrite because I've spent the last 6 months making fun of you for working in a funeral home. And then if I start working in it, then it's all jokes on me. A few months go by, I get a chance to sit down with management, and we go through, and she explained everything. And I was like, oh, well, that just makes sense. And it's very suitable to me as a person because of what I do in pre-planning. I get the benefit of dealing with the people who are clear of mind and I've already thought of this and I kind of know what I want. Can you explain further kind of mindset?
Interesting.
Which is a lot different. Then I also deal with the families that have lost a loved one in the midst of it, and I see both sides of the equation, which is a neat perspective in a lot of respects. And I've always been the one at Thanksgiving that brought up the awkward subjects. And they were like, "Why? What is wrong with you? Why are you the way you are?" And I'm like, "It's just who I am."
Yeah.
And now I bring up the most awkward subject, and I do it daily. And I put a fun spin on it. I try to bring, basically, my goal. Meeting with a family that's lost someone recent or pre-planning. My goal is simply bring a smile or bring some laughter to them. At the end of the day, that's all I care about. If you decide to go with our services, if you decide to pre-plan, that's all bonus. Yeah. At the end of the day, if I've made someone laugh, I've been successful.
I love that. You're dealing with a pretty heavy subject here. Like how do you gauge what's appropriate and what's not? Because you are this bright, silly, put the fun in funeral. I mean, we joke all the time, super high energy and everything. How do you gauge how much to give and when to throttle back?
So one of my skills is, as a person, I am capable of blending in with my surroundings. I am a very chameleon-style personality, and I've always been that way. Amidst that, I've also taken several public speaking courses and other things of that nature to help me understand that mirroring and helping them understand and like giving leading questions and helping them open up to me to create the rapport and build the relationship. Once I've built the relationship, then I catch on to something. One thing in networking that you may or may not know about me is no commercial is ever the same.
Yeah.
The reason being is I don't know my commercial generally until I stand up. And so literally every commercial is off the cuff. I make it up on the spot.
Yeah.
And I use what's around me in the room. I use who's around me in the room.
Yep.
And I pull on experiences that others are having so that it can be relatable.
Yeah. It's like 30 seconds of stand-up.
Yep, basically.
No, it's so
Yeah.
funny because so Justin and I met in a networking group, right? B and I talk about it all the time just because I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
How networking in general, but specifically how they do it. But what initially drew me to you was that I finally had somebody else that did that.
Yep.
And so we've had a couple times where we've played off each other, and so it's such a fun thing to be able to do. But I think that that skill, I can see how that would essentially set you up particularly well to be able to deal with all different types of people that are coming into this challenge with any level of I guess humor or just different personalities that they all have, different viewpoints.
One thing that it's been presented to me is a gentleman who is a professional coach, sales coach.
Yeah.
Was in a networking group that I was a part of. All he saw was the Bearded Bowtie, this rambunctious goofball who may or may not know what he's talking about in that general moment, and just kind of overall just a little off kilter.
Uh-huh.
He took the opportunity to sit with me to go through what I talked to about families and pre-planning and all of that. And as we sit down and we get into it, I'm a completely different person.
Interesting.
And it's not the extreme that I've lost myself. It's so much more that I've now met him where he was at.
I see.
And by the end of that meeting, I may have made a few chuckles. I may have made a couple jokes to make it lighten the mood a little bit. But for him, I met him where he was at, where it was very temperate, very stoic,
yes,
very calm.
Yeah. And so you're not going to come in at,
correct.
100,000 miles an hour.
Correct. And when we're dealing with loss, and you get those families that have just lost a loved one, a father, a mother, a brother, a child, you don't go in
full hand,
full bore on extreme joy and optimism.
Yeah.
But there is a certain finesse to it that I have become an expert in reading the room and feeling out the situation. And if it's not for me, then I will generally just sit back and allow the funeral director to take control of absolutely everything and allow myself to take that back seat and step out when it's appropriate.
So describe your role. Somebody is in the funeral home. What is it that you do specifically?
So the majority of my role is pre-planning. So a gentleman or lady come up to me and say, hey, I'm 55. My kids are out of the house. I'm now about to retire. I just went through the loss of my parent, and now I need to figure out for myself so my kids don't have to deal with it.
Right.
Or, hey, we've been retired for the last 20 years, and now we're not getting any younger.
Approaching the finish line here.
We're getting closer, and again, I don't want my family to deal with it. I just want it to be the way I want it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the majority of what I deal with. A large part of the other section of that is going to be the time of need. Someone's lost a loved one, and my role in that experience is, one, to help everyone in the room understand what pre-planning is and how it can be done to alleviate the burden in the future. Mm-hmm. Not something to worry about in this moment, but something that no one really knows about until they're in it.
Right.
But also I deal with the cemetery at our cemetery location in Mesa, where I assist in helping finding plots and obtaining the vaults and making sure that their services for the burial aspect or going in a mausoleum is all taken care of and organized on that as well.
And really just getting things off of someone's plate, 100%. I feel like is a lot of what you do.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, when you're going through any difficult time, but with this specifically, the last thing that you want to do is find out what color the inside of the casket's going to be, and like all of those different things that are just like, oh my gosh, like this is the least of my worries right now,
Yep.
I had, so within like the last month, which Kayla knows, I lost my grandma, my wife lost her grandma, and then a close friend of mine my age passed away. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like out of nowhere. Like it was all like clumped together, and it was just crazy. And I view death and funerals a little bit differently, I think. I'm probably one of those ones that might be a little bit more irreverent, you know? I was telling my wife at my funeral, I want to have me like telling jokes like on a screen just in the background.
Yes.
Wouldn't that just be so fun?
Oh, that'd be great.
You know, have it set up a photo booth and,
Yeah.
you know, anyway. I don't know. Maybe
Selfie with Mitch.
Yeah, maybe not. Like yeah.
See, that's where my irreverence goes.
Yeah,
I'm like, ooh,
yeah.
how far
Anyways,
can we take this?
Can I be like this when
Yeah.
I'm buried?
Oh, yeah.
You know? Oh my gosh. Anyways, but yeah, it's a crazy thing to have that all kind of happen at once, and we all of a sudden are having these questions come up over and over and over again. And I've got 6 kids, which I've talked to you guys about that quite a bit, but they're all under 9, and death is a new thing for them. And so being able to explain to them and kind of help them through these kind of things has presented its own set of challenges. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was, and ask you is, what are some of the things that we as those left behind can do to help our loved ones address grief and loss and help them to get through it?
What I do myself, which may or may not be the best way to do it, of course, but what I do myself is ultimately just show up. Be there, be present. It doesn't always have to be about the grief. It doesn't always have to be about the loss.
Interesting.
It can simply be, hey, how you doing? You want to go get lunch? Let's talk about the house. Where are you moving to? How are the kids? Are they playing soccer? And the great thing about that is, one, they're going to grieve. You don't have to remind them to do it. Yeah. And a big thing nowadays is like people are choosing to be cremated and taken back home. The complication with that is if you're not having a service, whether that's, for my grandfather, it was at his favorite watering hole because that's who he was, right?
Yeah.
For other people, it goes to church. If you're not having some kind of service that you can tell people, oh, we had that at this day and time, or, oh, we're going to have that at this day and time, then people keep asking, hey, when's the service? Hey, when's the service? Hey, when's the service? And you're constantly reminded of that situation where you're like, I'm not having a service. Well, why not? Well, they didn't want a service, but what about all of his friends? And it gets really weird, really awkward. And that's why I tell people it doesn't matter what the service looks like. It could be you sitting in your living room just talking.
Yeah.
And that could be the service.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be this formal thing.
But just show up, be present. Don't ignore them. Don't leave them to their own devices. If you feel they need space, let them tell you that they need space. Don't overburden them either. But
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's really important. Don't just assume that it's like, oh well, I won't talk to them at all because they need space right now. It's like a lot of times that's the opposite of what we need when we're going through a difficult time, even though we might just want to be reclusive and everything like that. You need, when you're going through something difficult, you need at least some sort of companionship, connection, someone that you can attach to in those moments, even if not to talk about it directly, to just be with. You know.
One thing that I learned. So I served a 2-year mission, and on that, you're trying to help people understand certain subject matter that they may have never been accustomed to, right? May have never heard about it.
Yeah.
But now you're trying to tell them to change their entire life, right? They're a smoker, for an example. Part of that equation when I'm helping them understand how to quit smoking, right? Similar to grief, how to get out of grief or get beyond grief, right? Your brain is a stage, and you're capable of only one thought at a time. Whatever you entertain on that stage is what is going to dominate your life. And one thing I've come to find is if you are what you focus on. And if you're describing a pink pig with a curly tail and blue eyes and it's rolling in the mud, And then I change and I start explaining a pirate ship that's on the ocean. And as that pirate ship is rolling over the waves and then a storm cloud is brewing in the distance. Well, while I explained the pirate ship, not once did you think about the curly-tailed pig.
Right.
Similar with grief. Being that friend helps you alleviate the burden of having to think about it because our minds gravitate towards that thing, whatever that thing is, if it's grief of loss or addiction or what have you.
Or whatever it is. And I think that it's important to note, too, that grief is important.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to grieve, however it is that you do it.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a loss, to recognize the influence that they had in your life, to recognize how they live on and the memories that you have. One of my favorite quotes, which everybody knows that I'm a huge superhero nerd, one of my favorite quotes is by Vision. And he says, "What is grief if not love persevering?"
Mm.
And I think that that's such a great way to look at that, and having that attitude versus just thinking, oh my gosh, like this sucks and it's horrible. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not discounting that at all.
Right.
It does suck. But when you can accompany the grief with the knowledge and perspective that your love for them is living on,
Mm-hmm.
is that you wouldn't feel that if they had not made such an impact, and focus on that as well. So take
Mm-hmm.
the good with the bad, I think is such an important thing to realize. How about you personally? Because it's a different question helping those around you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with grief as an individual?
That is an interesting question. I'd heard once a gentleman talks about how much easier it is to teach people how to do things versus doing it yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I know how that goes, right? A large part of how my grief progresses is based a lot on my faith. Mm-hmm. Understanding, having an understanding or a truth to hold on to, or something that I can look to the other side of the veil after death and say, this is what's expected to happen. And as long as that outcome is potentially happy, well, then I'm happy for that person, right?
Yeah.
And the grief of loss is more the fact that I don't get to be with them anymore and that they're not with me anymore, right? That's a separation for a time. But again, my faith helps me reinforce that to say, well, when I walk on the other side of the door, they'll be there waiting for me.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of people don't necessarily have that. But for me, sometimes it's throwing myself into a project. It's distracting my mind. Like I said, that's not always the best thing to do. Sometimes you got to be in the grief.
At least not in excess.
Correct. Right. Not to a detrimental level.
Yeah.
Where it starts affecting you in a way that you are now at a level of depression where you can't get up in the morning.
Right.
Where you can't go and do the regular things you were doing, like going to the gym and going to work and spending time with the wife and kids or other spouses and significant others.
And then life becomes about the distraction.
Correct.
As opposed to dealing with it in a healthy
Correct.
way. But sometimes you need that, though.
Oh, you do. And one thing I enjoy, and grief can come in many forms. It doesn't have to be about death. It could be, I'm grieving a situation that I just argue with my spouse over a certain subject, right? I'm now harboring grief because I'm upset. I'm angry. So what do? I throw myself in something that is what would I deem service, right? I go find some laundry to fold. Honestly, that's the most calming thing. If you've never done it, by all means, grab a basket. You will find by the end of that basket, you've forgotten what you were upset about. So I attempt to throw myself into the service of others.
I think that that's a really good one. So, you talked about a distraction. I think service is such an amazing outlet to be able to help you get through whatever difficult time that it is you're going through, because when you're focusing on somebody else's problems, all of a sudden your problems are in the background.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on the stage, like you said.
Right.
But then also it also can give you a lot of perspective, I think, on it's like when you're seeing what somebody else is going through, all of a sudden you're like, I'm good with my challenges.
Right.
I don't have theirs. So I think I'll keep mine
Yeah.
as opposed to going through what they're going through. But No, I think that's really, really insightful. Is service.
Yeah,
That's a big one.
And I'll be completely honest, because I am a very, very happy, uplifted, optimistic individual.
Yeah.
What we see with comedians, as well as those with optimistic, uplifting, is that our highs are really high and our lows are really low. Yep, there it is. And complete honesty, I'm an incredibly vulnerable human when I give myself the opportunity to be.
Yeah.
Something that a lot of people don't know is my mother is a 50-year-old late-stage Alzheimer's patient. She's in a group home because she can't do natural living things.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I grieve her on a regular basis, and that involves a lot of crying. She's still here, but she's not here.
Wow.
My mom isn't here anymore. So I have to face the grief of it constantly until her time to pass occurs. Then I can conclude that portion of my grief. But in the meantime, there's a lot of crying.
It's a constant. Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. But just like most things, the longer you're subjected to something, the more desensitized you are to it. When I first got into the funeral home, I cried a lot because I'm in a funeral home and there's funerals all the time, and they're playing taps at military services and folding the flag, and lose it every single time.
Oh, yeah.
And eventually you get desensitized to that part of the emotion. Being with my mom the way she's been for the last few years, I've become accustomed to it. So I don't have to cry as often because I've grieved that part of it. She is now where she is in her status, and that's okay.
And I think that, one, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a deeply personal experience to go through. I think that kind of touching on kind of building up a resilience through going through anything like grief, but going through it repeatedly builds up that resilience. And I think that when we can take a difficult situation in our lives and turn it around to then help other people that are going through it, I think that is also a way to help us continue to move forward in a healthy way. You and I we both belong to the same faith, and one of the things that I talk about Jesus Christ going through what he did was to not only redeem mankind and all of these different things, but it was also to be able to truly understand what people go through. And I think that when we can use our pain, our suffering, to then look around us and help other people that are going through something similar, I think that ultimately is a way to kind of elevate ourselves out of that depression, if you will.
Yeah, honestly, like with my why, right? People ask me, like, you work in a funeral home, why? What's your why? My first story involved a lady, wonderful lady. She walked into the funeral home. She sat down in a seat. She didn't speak to anyone. She just sat in a seat.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't make eye contact. She just kind of sat there, blank stares. The front desk lady was nice enough to ask if she wanted some crackers and a juice, something like that. Give her something. She realized she hadn't eaten all day. She had just been told that her husband was given 3 days left to live and in hospice.
Gosh.
We get down and we finally get to sit in a room, and we're going through everything. I spend the next 3 hours with her.
Yeah.
We're laughing. We're joking. We're enjoying our time together. By the end of that, we are hugging and having a great time, because now the significant burden of realizing her life companion, her eternal companion, is now at the end of his mortal journey. That was a lot for her to handle all in one moment. But using that experience of being that quirky individual that was able to bring a little light to the situation, it lightened her up a little bit. She was able to make those hard decisions with a little bit more clarity of mind than had she waited till after his passing.
Yeah.
3 days later, he passed away.
Wow.
I saw her when she came in, and she almost had a glow and a slight smirk upon her face, like, thank you so much, because now today is not the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Because of what we did. And now I've transitioned over to using that as well as the story of my mom. Like, I have been there. I have done that. That's why I love doing what I do.
Wow.
Because there are so many people that walk in the room and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I'll find a nice lady that they're, I think I want cremation. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Guarantee you, by the end of that meeting, not only will she have a greater understanding of what she wants,
Yeah.
she may know what she wants, but also we're going to be uplifted.
Yeah.
We're going to feel better. That's going to be a burden off of her shoulders. And she's going to walk out having at least laughed once, because that's just who I am. That's my goal.
Yeah.
But I can use those experiences, and I like how you relate that to Christ, as using that as a means to succor the people. When those people walk in the door with that grief and loss and frustration of life, and I'm able to be that burden reliever,
Yeah.
it gives me so much joy.
To just know that you're not alone.
Yes. Yes.
That you're not the only one that has ever gone through it, because it is so easy to feel like you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you're on this island, but then you realize no, you're now part of a pretty big club.
Right.
that we've all been through something very difficult. And I think that if you know, when we're going through something, our heads are down, but if we just take a minute to look up, we'd realize that we're not alone.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes for people that might have gone through things, it's kind of our job, or I would say opportunity, to maybe lift the heads of the people around us, to help them realize that, hey, you are not alone.
Yeah.
You
I've
know?
been there. I've
Yeah.
done that. You're going to make it through because I did.
Yeah.
And they're able to show that example.
Beautiful. One of the things that I was thinking about coming as we're getting closer to having this episode was the words of Charlie Brown kept coming into my mind. He says, "Good grief," all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, is there a thing is there such a thing as good grief? You know, and I kind of touched a little bit on it about kind of how it shows the love that we've
Mm-hmm.
had for him. What are your thoughts on that? Is there such a thing as good grief?
Definitely. Again, grief looks very different to each person, each individual, and you're going to go through different phases of life, and that grief may look different at each phase. The loss, again, I work in a funeral home, so death is kind of a general topic that I bring up, but the death of a parent versus the death of a child versus the death of a spouse. There are three very different griefs. And there are ways in which you can have good grief. And the way you have that good grief is, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a professional in any way, shape, or form other than in the funeral world, is to honor them. By honoring that parent, that spouse, that child, you're not giving up your life for these emotions of grief. You're honoring that love. You're letting the love persevere. You're letting that experience that you had, however short or long it was with that person, you're letting that grow into more of an experience, and you're adding it to the memory bank.
Yeah.
Because if there's anything I know about my faith, is that everything inside my brain I get to keep, no matter how easily I forget it in this life. But I take every opportunity to have an experience, no matter how difficult it can be, so that in the next life I can look back on that and say, oh, I remember that. And sometimes I was like, I remember that, I'm so glad I'm out of it. Or I look back at that and, man, I wish I could go back to that, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that was a good grief. This one, not so much. And it all just kind of depends. But I definitely believe there's a good grief.
No, and I think that I love what you said about honoring the people that are gone. I mean, we've talked about some heavy stuff, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing of what we're talking about. What would you say? Can you share an experience? Can you think of one that stands out in your mind where you had a fun time a funny experience or with a family or somebody or yourself, that there's this cataclysmic event that has just occurred, and how it's ended up being a funny thing, or goofy, or has been treated with some sort of levity that's just been, you walk away going, wow, I did not think that would have been a fun, joyous experience.
You know, a lot of that comes from when an older person passes, because they've lived a life. The grief is different. Again, you've experienced life. And some families walk in, and you're going to have one of a few different reactions to this experience, no matter the age of the person.
Yeah.
You got that 95-year-old great-grandma that passed away. Well, you're either going to have a lot of really funny experiences, and you get to learn more about a great-grandma that you never thought you'd ever want to know a story about. And you're like, oh, wait, just keep that in the family next time. But then you'll also get the not so pleasant side of where the family starts to fight, and then sometimes that happens in the funeral home in front of us, and we're like, we laugh about it later.
Kind of twiddling your thumbs.
Yeah, we're like, okay, well, you remember that family? Oh my goodness, they were a handful.
It's like,
I'm so glad we could serve them, but
days of our lives, some like soap opera going on in the lobby.
Like sometimes it's on the front porch, sometimes cops are called. It all depends on the situation.
Jeez Louise.
It's a lot of fun.
That's funny. No, I remember I said this a couple times, and my wife just rolls her eyes, but people are like, I'd mentioned I lose my grandma, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, and they get like they don't know how to deal with it. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, she's a horrible person. I'm glad she's gone. But and then they're just like, what? I was like, no, I'm just kidding. I was like, she's fantastic. Like I absolutely love her, super close. But it's like being able to when people find out they don't know about something that's tragic, they don't really know how to react to it. And so it's like I find, like, for me, it's like by being able to kind of break the ice with something where they're just not expecting it all is kind of a way to, I don't know, make other people feel
and
a little more comfortable.
I wear a bow tie, so clearly I'm an enjoyable experience to be around generally.
That's what a bow tie means.
Right, exactly. Like bow tie says this guy's fun. When I see an attorney in a bow tie, I'm like, that doesn't make sense in my brain. But, okay. But when I wear a bow tie, you just look at the guy like, this guy is some kind of fun. I'm not exactly sure. And then you find out, you're like, oh, that was not what I thought. But the good thing is, I've got so many one-liners that I've gotten either told to me or that I've come up with throughout the years. That we did the Queen Creek Town Trunk or Treat on Saturday.
Yeah.
Was that Saturday? Yeah, it was Saturday. And we brought a hearse. Because why not?
Because why not?
It's Halloween, and it's trunk or treat. And let's have it. And I'm sitting there, and again, understandably, a lot of people have lost someone. And I don't go there in the intent to offend anybody.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the bow tie kind of deflects offense. It's like, that's not actually a thing. You're not offended. Believe me, you're not offended. But
that's funny.
I was sitting there talking to people. I'm like, step right up. Make sure you vote for the funeral home. We've got the biggest trunk in town. Jeez. And they were like, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, vote for us. We did the best trunk. I think we nailed it. And they're like, I see what you did. It's constant.
Yeah.
Constant.
Yeah.
And bringing that levity, bringing those one-liners, you always get the old man. It's like, I expected a line out the door because everyone would be dying to get in.
Hey. It's just like the worse the better.
Oh, yeah. It just gets worse. And it's a lot of fun. But when you can laugh at it, it's so much easier to handle. Yeah. That's why I do it, right? That's why I try to bring joke, levity, happiness, joy to the darkest of situations. This is quite literally the darkest subject matter on the face of Earth.
Yeah.
Because you can have all of the catastrophic situations in the world, but when you lose a loved one, that is now the most catastrophic event in the world. And if I can do just a little bit to bring that joy, right? And you'll get families, they'll come in, they're either beside themselves or laughing walking in, and then they start telling stories. And then the funny ones to me are when the family in the room find out about Grandpa. And they're like,
I had no idea.
I thought Grandpa's last name was this. They're like, no, No, that was his grandpa or something. Or they came from across the world. Those kind of stories are so cool. They're like, yeah, they came across the world through Ellis Island. They had to change their name because it was too Swedish. So they added a letter.
That's so funny. Totally changed the pronunciation.
And it's great. It's so funny to see just the different dynamic. And they're like, he was in the military? Yeah, he was in the military. Why didn't he talk about that? There's not something to talk about in his day.
That's so cool, though, to be able to kind of get to know the person all over again.
And it's neat
really
because
neat.
when families bring in photos and videos and they write the obituary and we put up memorial service folders and videos and things like that, it is so much fun to see and connect with that person.
Yeah.
You're like, not only have you exited this mortal journey, but your body is currently in the funeral home, but now I'm able to connect with you on a level that had not been possible previously.
Yeah. That's wild. So as we're kind of approaching the end of our time here, I wanted to ask you, and you've kind of mentioned some of the things that you've been through. One of my favorite segments is, you've seen the podcast, is the positivity prize fighter section, right? Which I just love the imagery, because sometimes life just will punch you in the face repeatedly and knock you on your butt. But it's positivity is not about it. To me, is not all sunshine and rainbows. It's when life knocks you down, are you going to get back up and keep going? Mm-hmm. And so, can you share an experience where life has just knocked you down, but you have gotten back up?
So, interestingly enough, this is actually something that's taken place over the last 10 to 12 months of my life. Is I found myself at the beginning of this year coming to realize one thing about me is I'm really good at putting blinders on to subject matter I don't want to deal with.
Interesting.
Bugs the crap out of my wife. She's like, I just want to talk about your feelings. I'm like, I really don't. But I'm getting better at that. I'm getting more vulnerable, more open with my emotions and feelings. But in that process, the beginning of this year, recognizing the monumental change across our country, across the economy, across my job description, and what that looks like, and how people may or may not be going to casketed burial, or they may not be in Arizona because it's hot, or whatever have you, and realizing like my world is collapsing in on itself, in addition to like everything happening all at once. Now my mental health is draining. And now I'm finding myself having zero interest waking up in the morning.
Yeah.
And I would never self-proclaim depression, but if that's what depression is, I never want to go back.
Yeah.
Because I did not like who I was. No one else liked who I was. They would look at me and they were like, what's wrong? I was like, nothing's wrong. But what they didn't see was the happy, joyous Justin.
Yeah.
Come to find out, I'm pretty out on my sleeves when it comes to my emotions. It's like, oh, he's in a good mood. This is great. And that's most of the time.
Yeah.
But when I found myself in that dark place, and I found myself just constant, everything, one after another, something broke, something couldn't get fixed. I couldn't fix it myself. And I just kept getting hit and hit and hit. And it was, eventually I came around to the concept that's like, you know what? Just grin and bear it. It's a phase. Mm-hmm. Again, focus on something else. Don't think about that. So I'd focus more on Christ and his teachings. I'd focus more on reading scriptures. I'd focus more on listening to a talk, or I'd follow after a guru on business advice. And like, okay, this is how a business is and should be run. And I'd just throw myself into it. And that helped elevate my mindset. I never stopped going to the gym throughout this process, and I generally go 5 to 6 times a week.
Good for you.
Yeah, right.
I might go 5 to 6 times a year.
That's better than nothing. That's great. I always like talking about going to the gym. People, oh hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to the gym. Oh, cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go punch death in the face one more time. And just like every time I go to the gym, I just punch death right in the face. But I never stopped going to the gym, but the gym became less interesting. It wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
It was a chore. But
Yeah.
I kept doing it because it was a habit and it was just part of who I am at this point. And I just didn't find interest in anything. My kids were like, why are you so angry? Why are you so upset?
More irritable.
Yeah, more irritable and things like that. And when I started making the change, I started focusing, I started redirecting that energy to more positive, constructive thoughts and processes. I found myself in a much better situation. And now I'm here where I'm like, let's go. It's another day.
Yeah.
Like, it's a Monday, it's a Tuesday, it's Wednesday. This is so exciting. It's Friday, darn it. I have to go figure out what I'm supposed to do for a weekend. I'm glad I have a wife so she can tell me what I'm supposed to do for the weekend.
There you go.
Yeah, it's great.
No, I think that's one of the things that you said that really kind of called out to me was focusing on the temporary nature of what you're going through. That, you don't, because when you're in that situation, it's difficult. A lot of times we have those blinders on and we don't see that there is an end to it, and so I think that's something that I'm going to take away from that, to be like, okay, well, if I'm going through a hard time, then I can take comfort knowing that it's not forever. I'll get through it, and I'll be better for it on the other side. I think having that outlook while you're going through it, I think is important.
Yeah, having as many kids as you do, I figured you already knew that. And that's what I was like. That's where I got it from, honestly.
Oh yeah.
As I would look at my kids and I'm like, why? Why is this a thing? Why can't you just not do that, whatever it is?
Oh my
Why
gosh.
can't you just sleep through the night? Why can't you just fix this problem? Why can't you just communicate? And in that darkness, I was very irritable and frustrated. Like, just tell me what you want. I'll give it to you. I don't even care what it is.
Yeah.
Like, just fix it. And then I realized they're in a phase.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day they say, I will miss it. I'm like, I don't know about that part.
I don't know.
I don't know about that part. But I will miss them being a little kid.
Yeah.
I look at my daughter and my son and I'm like, you're perfect. You're amazing. You're great, solid, smart, individual humans that are learning what life is all about.
Yeah.
And if I don't teach you the correct principles, that's on me.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, okay, you're in a phase. We're going to bear through this phase. Once you're on the other side of that phase, we'll branch into something new.
Yeah.
And now I just put it on my own self and I'm like, I'm in a phase.
Interesting.
I'm in a phase and it's temporary. COVID taught me that.
Oh, jeez Louise.
That was the longest amount of time. I don't remember the first year of my son's life. I don't remember any of it. I'm in pictures. I was there.
Yeah.
I was a very active father, but there was so much going on. I don't remember any of it.
That's crazy.
And now I look back, it was a phase.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, no, I like to think as we're going through just this crazy, there's this cacophony of noise at my house. Everybody's screaming, or
Everybody's
something's going on, and I'm just like, this is gonna make a great story.
Oh yeah.
We literally, the other day, my wife was on the phone, and I hear, "Stop stabbing your brother and put the knife away, and get your other brother off the table so he stops swinging from the chandelier." All in one breath. So I'm just like, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Great material
Yeah.
for later. So
Most
and
epic book you've ever read.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Stop stabbing your brother, put the knife away, and get your brother off the table so he stops swinging from the chandelier.
So
And there's I've got so much more.
Oh,
we don't have
I
enough time.
can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But no, Justin, thank you,
Yeah, thank you.
for being on, and to all of you, remember, grief can be good. Do those things that are important to help you get through that grief. And if somebody around you is going through something, be there. Show up, like Justin said. Just be there for them. And if they need to talk about it, let them talk about it. And if they need to not talk about it, then let them not talk about it, but just be there for them. I love you guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.